Hey everyone, welcome to Locked In. This evening's show is going to take off on a conversation that has sprung from the comments on a recent video we did on the quarterback situation at Alabama. The subject of tonight's show is one Jalen Milroe. If you could describe Jalen Milroe as anything, I think it would be a lightning rod. It seems like some people love him. It seems like some people want him gone. I don't know. But what I do know is that there is a story tracking that is going to become a big deal by spring practice. You might not want to hear that, and we really can't help that. But there's problems in the quarterback room in Tuscaloosa. So our last video, we discussed at length Mr. Mack, who's come in, and Austin Mack is an interesting cat, and you may not like to hear that, but that's what we have to say. If Kalen DeBoer stayed at Washington, Austin Mack would be his starter next year. No questions asked. Wonder of wonders, Kalen DeBoer moves to Tuscaloosa to become head coach of the Alabama Crimson Tide. Takes a whole lot of offensive people with him, including one Austin Mack. Oh, but he's going to help the Alabama players learn the language of the system. And if you'll buy that, I've got a lot of stuff to sell you. So, is it just us? No. Actually, there's a really recent report by CBS Sports, who happens to cover a lot of SEC football, who are at least willing to go so far as to say could get interesting. With recent transfers, it's a very good chance Austin Mack could be a quick number two. Now, Ty Simpson's there, we understand that, but it's very much likely that he will enter Crimson Tide depth chart at number two from day one. Question is, will he remain number two, or might he at some point this season become number one? It's a subject of debate, maybe even heated debate. So here tonight, we're going to take on this question. We're going to look at it from a few different ways. We're going to point out some interesting stats, especially about Kalen DeBoer's tendencies as an offensive coach, that are at least going to raise a few eyebrows, we think. So, gentlemen, where do we start?
We're going to start with some film on Jalen Milroe. Now, these are all going to be highlights. Usually we'll go through and we'll show some lowlights, just to get a general idea of whoever we're talking about. But the thing I would like to point out in these highlights is that while some of these considered highlights, um, some of them are like bad throws and they're just caught by his receivers. So we'll go through this, and this will kind of transition into the stats that we'll pull up later. Um, so if you just want to run it, Rev, what you're going to see a lot of is Jalen Milroe running the ball. We know that Jalen Milroe is an athlete, and I mean, dude can absolutely take off. He's big, he's strong, he's fast, and is very good at running the football. Now, the thing about that is, uh, that's good. He can do that, and that's really how Alabama had a lot of their success this year, by him running the football. And he'd do it sometimes 20 times a game for a lot of yards and a lot of touchdowns. But the thing about that is he can have them explosive pass plays right off of that. That's the one thing you can say about Jalen Milroe is, while, like Walk said, he's a lightning rod. He can have them big run plays, and he has them big pass plays. The thing is, he can't really read a field, though. If you look here, he has two reads right there, and it's just a deep shot, and that's a ball thrown behind his receiver. So I mean, like, there's little things like that where his eyes are just tunnel vision on one guy the entire time. He sees that little hook in the corner and just goes deep because it's open. It's like that's one read right there. He's only looking for one guy in the corner, and it's a good ball right there. But it's like simple things. He's never having to go too hard to find his guy. And, 2 reads is about the max you're going to get out of him unless he's, having to make something up like right there where he's throwing over the middle in between 3 people. And while it looks like a good play by him, that's a rib breaker ball in between 3 people. It's like that is not the ideal pass you take right there. But it works out because of his receivers. So I mean, there's a lot of good that can happen from him, but there can also be bad things. I mean, this guy's a lightning rod. Anything you'd like to say about it, Rev?
So pretty consistently with a lot of these pass plays, you watch where his eyes go, and very rarely will you see him make true reads. He looks off guys every now and then. You see that happen. But a lot of times the part of the field that he's looking at is where he's going to throw to. And here's a good example of what happens when the guy that he wants to throw to pre-snap isn't available or he doesn't feel like he can make something happen. All right, stares it down. It's not there. Tuck it and go. Now he does a good job recognizing when stuff opens up for him in the middle of the field, and that's something that I guess caters to his ability to run the football. He is fantastic at running the football. He has good vision. He's a heck of an athlete. He has good speed, good strength. I mean, all the things that you want with a guy carrying the football, he's got them, and he does so at the quarterback position. So a lot of these plays, either they're design runs or they are one read and go. We talked about that before, where quarterbacks, they can have 1-2 reads where you have one option, 2 options, then you tuck it. Or you scan a whole field where you have multiple, you have your full progression, 1, 2, 3, 4 check down, 1, 2, 3 check down. Or like in the case of Milroe, it's one and done. A lot of these are one and done reads, or they're at least single side of the field reads where it's 1-2. But right here, he's locked in the whole way. If you just watch watch his helmet.
Watch the strap on his helmet, particularly.
Yeah, I mean, that helmet doesn't really move. Now, obviously, he knows he's got this, he's got his check down, his out route over here down low. You can see that with your peripheral vision. But he wants to go to a very similar spot most of the time. Now, right there, here's a better example of him looking into a different direction. But you see where he wants to go. He's got this idea over here on his left. He wants this. He keeps going back to it. It never opens up. He finally looks over to his right after extending the play. Great job extending the play with his legs, moving in the pocket and finding your guy. He is capable of doing it sometimes, but it is not an every play kind of deal. And that's not to necessarily take away from anything. That's how this offense is designed for him to operate in, and he operates it well enough. I mean, he has a good deep ball, and he has good receivers that can, make good plays for him in contested catches, which you need that. Everybody, all quarterbacks are going to want that. But then this is where he really makes you hurt, which is with his feet. And obviously we're kind of holding ourselves back talking about another aspect of the game, or talking about another aspect of this whole narrative or story that's being talked about by not just us. And we're letting this film kind of play all the way through before we really get into that. But this film, the 6 minutes of it, is him making great plays, and half of them are with his legs, and the other half are mostly one read throws.
And the receiver having to make a play.
Like right there. That's a good ball. I mean, I don't want to take away from the throw. He puts it where his guy can get it. And you've heard me compliment other good quarterbacks and quarterbacks that I consider much better throws of the ball than him. You've heard me talk about that before, where, hey, he put that where only his guy could get it. His guy had to make a play on it still. So, I mean, I'm not going to take away from those throws. Sometimes you got to make those throws. But what Chance is kind of referring to here is that seems to be a little bit more of a constant thing with him. And that also goes with the kind of the 1-2 read, like this one here was a 1-2. He throws that ball that's contested because he doesn't have another option, and the path in front of him with his legs is not really opening it up. So like that was great coverage by that DB. He made a good throw over the shoulder. That was a great throw, and his receiver made a good catch. So not trying to take away from Jalen Milroe. He does what he's asked to do pretty dang well. It's just, is that going to be what he's asked to do going in the future? I think that's what we're going to get to. But nobody can take away from his athleticism. Lightning rod is a great expression for him, not only within the conversation surrounding him, but his ability to lead his team, and the way that he makes his plays. He makes electrifying plays. He makes great plays with his feet, and he has a very good cast of receivers that are really helping him out, which is what you always want. You always want your receivers to help you out when you're a quarterback. That's not a foreign thing. It's not just a Jalen Milroe thing. That's anybody, anywhere. You want your receivers to make it look good when you don't make a great throw.
And one thing I'd like to point out about your one read and run discussion is that that's kind of what he tried against Michigan. And I'd say that's a big reason that he wasn't as productive against Michigan, is because when he did that, he'd run into that wall right in front of him, and they didn't really give him a running lane. They kind of made him think he had one, and then they just collapsed the ends back into the wall they had set up. So that's a big reason why he wasn't as productive in the Michigan game. And y'all say, well, they went to overtime with Michigan. They almost won that game. At the same time, you got to think about the punt that was bobbled, where Alabama got a touchdown off of that, starting at like the 17-yard line, and a few other things in that game about like that. But it's one of those things. It's like Milroe is good to a certain extent. He can get things done. He has the electric plays. It's just like, does he have the consistency in throwing the ball after going through his progression, where he can throw the ball, say, 30, 40 times a game?
It's really good you bring that number up. And the reason why I say that is, if the pass is any indicator of what Kalen DeBoer is going to do, he's going to throw the ball well more than 30 times a game. Question then becomes, what will that look like with Jalen Milroe throwing the ball as many as 40, maybe even 50 times a game, because that's happened a few times? That's a good question. I don't know. So I guess just to move a little bit further is, if you look at Milroe's stats, if you just pull up, ESPN or anybody else, 2023 stats. So one of the questions that we have, and we think that others will have more deeply they look into Milroe's stats, doesn't really spring from Milroe, because the issue that I have, like if and I've said this, in just conversations before we've recorded, is I think that if you give him just the stat test, he has an impressive stat line. So I think it's very hard. You don't unseat a guy like this just because you feel like it. And that's where I'll stand, I think, on Milroe, all the way through. I mean, I think that this is going to be the starter. That Milroe is going to be the starter, and I think it's his job to lose. And maybe he doesn't. Maybe he does. We don't know how the season's going to play out, because there's something that's going to change radically for Alabama if things go as according to, I guess I won't say according to plan, because we don't know the plan, but if things go similarly to how they've gone with Kalen DeBoer in the past, it's not uncommon for DeBoer's offenses to have a quarterback who throws the ball over 50 times in a game. That's not every game, but it happens. It's definitely not like a DeBoer team to have a quarterback that's going to throw the ball under 35 times a game. And as you can see from the game log for Jalen Milroe, at the bottom, you see those impressive stats: 65.8 completion percentage, 28-34 on yards, 23 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. That's good. Thing that stands out just to me is that sack total. And that's probably not all his fault, because, I mean, just to tell you the truth, I'm an offensive line guy, and I would have probably asked, and I would say Alabama probably did ask about half to all of that starting offensive line against Michigan to go ahead and enter the portal, because surely there's something better out there. Who knows if it's players, who knows if it's coaching. I would probably get rid of all of them, both sides of, the equation. But something you notice, like take, for instance, the Texas A&M game. Chance mentioned this just a second ago. 33 passing attempts, that sounds pretty Debour like. So I could see that working out. 321, that's good. 63%, not bad at all. 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. But boy, look at that last number over here. Excuse me. 6 sacks. That's tough. And so you wonder about that. I mean, he was sacked a lot. And if you look again at Texas, at the beginning of the year, 27, that's his next closest to 30. 5 sacks. No, I mean, Texas is a good team. Alabama's offensive line was rather porous, but it seems like as those tick up, as the attempts tick up, it seems like that maybe the sacks might too. But now at the same time, you could go back and argue against me, and that's fine. He had several other games, where you had 4 sacks, 5 sacks, where he didn't throw the ball that much. So maybe part of that's on him, maybe part of that's on the offensive line. Like I said, that line, in my opinion, pretty daggum bad. But I'm just interested to see what's going to happen to these numbers if he gets into a setup to where he is asked to throw the ball 45 times. Or do you guys think that that Kalen DeBoer will ever ask him to do that? Will he ride with what he's got and build the offense around him? Because that seems a lot like what that the Saban staff did. Is it seems like they played into Milroe's strengths, which I mean I have no doubt was frustrating, at times, but it got them to the semifinal. They were competitive. But, and I know what Chance is going to say, so just go ahead and say it.
Yeah, it got them to the semifinal. Is that what we're doing at Alabama now? Are we going to the semifinal to lose? Do we want to win a national championship at Alabama anymore? Like, has the tide shifted from, hey, we're here to win a natty every year? Like, come on now.
So Chance's Bulldog is coming out a little bit. And before we get into a little bit more of that conversation, because I do want to hit it a little bit, I want to go back slightly to the stats and kind of what Locke was alluding to. So if you look again at Milroe's, the highest that he had was 33, 1 game over 30. The second highest was 27. Now I'm going to share a new one, and this is going to be Michael Penix's stats from the same year. So this last year. Okay, before we get into the conversation that the Georgia Bulldog wants to talk about how Bama standards might be changing, I want to go back to the stats and something that Locke alluded to. So over here on the right side of the screen, you see Milroe's stats that we just went over. Again, highest is 33, next highest is 27. 1 game over 30 attempts, 284 passes. Over here on the left side of the screen, we have Michael Penix, Kalen DeBoer's quarterback at Washington in 2023. 555 attempts. So double the amount of attempts, or almost. The lowest amount that he went for in 2023 is 28. Or 25. There you go, 25 right there. The highest, 51. National championship game. He only passed 2 games under 30 attempts, 28 and 25. And then again, the next one was 30. So in the season, which they had 1 extra game because they played the national championship, he only had 2 that were under 30. Milroe had 1 that was over 30. 13 games for Michael Penix, 1 game for Jalen Milroe. Okay, maybe you're saying, well, that was just because he had Michael Penix, or maybe that was just because that's what they had this year. They had all those all-star receivers. Yeah, and there's another one that before we move on, there's another number that Chance just highlighted, the number of sacks. Now, yes, Washington had a much better O-line, but there is a reason why sack count is talked about with quarterbacks, because a lot of times the sack, yes, is on the offensive line, but plenty of times it's also on the quarterback and being able to make a read and get the ball out of his hand. And Penix is fantastic at getting the ball out of his hands quickly. And he still can, extend plays and move around in the pocket, but he does a really good job of knowing where he's going with the ball, making good reads, and getting the ball out fast. Milroe, on the other hand, sometimes not the case. But this is that 2023 Washington team that played in the national championship. They had 3 first round, probable first round receivers. Could be, great receivers, really good team. Well, what about the 2022 team? I have that one too. And that one, we'll just pull up that one by itself. All right. This was last year's 2022 team. 500 attempts. So we're still quite a bit over what Jalen did. Okay, here we have the 2022 stats for Michael Penix, the Washington offense. 500 passing attempts, so a little bit less than 2023. Still way more than Alabama have with Jalen Milroe. They played 2 less games. Obviously, they didn't make the playoffs or the championship. So there, that's a stat line that can be talked about with the difference between passing attempts. But I also want you to pay attention to the attempts per game. 1 game under 30, which was against a Portland State in their second game of the year, which I doubt he played too long in. The next
3 over 50.
Yeah. So that's right. So we had the Texas game over 50, the Oregon State game over 50, and then the Arizona State game over 50, the Cal game over 50. So we have 4 games over 50 all in that year. 1 game under 30. Everything else was over 30. The next lowest was 31 against Colorado. So, all right. In 2 years with Debour as head coach of Washington, yes, he had Michael Penix. That is a fair assessment. Michael Penix is a great ball thrower. That's what he's known for. He can make every read in the field, and he can make every throw. That's fair enough. Now, if we take away Penix from Debour, he also has had 2 years as head coach of Fresno State.
Mm-hmm.
In those 2 years, Fresno State, for passing percentage out of their plays, ranked 14th in the country and 10th in the country for pass play attempts. They were, I'll bring that stat up. I think we have them at
well, while you're looking that up, I'll mention, and I don't have this to share, but you can look this up, on the sportsreference.com. If you feel so inclined. Their quarterback in the 2021 season played 13 games, Jake Hayner. This is Fresno State, 490 passing attempts. So, I mean, this is a thing. I mean, I don't think that this is simply a Michael Penix thing. I don't think that this is a Fresno State thing. I think that this is the offense that Kalen DeBoer wants to run. Now, excuse me. Now you can go back also and look at his Sioux Falls numbers. He ran the ball a lot with Sioux Falls, especially in his last year there. But something that whenever I raised that point that Chance pointed out, like I would say, that's proof that he will he can run a different offense. But as Chance pointed out, it's a much lower classification than Alabama and SEC football. And we saw when he went to Fresno State, and even when he was OC at Indiana, those passing attempts per game are high. And so I have no reason to believe that that's going to change. So it raises a question, as we keep talking through these stats. I mean, what do you do? What do you do if you're Milroe? And what do you do if Milroe's your quarterback and, you tend to throw the ball this much?
Well, I think that leads us to a good question, and that is, how much did Alabama throw the ball compared to how much they ran the ball this year, if you want to pull that up, Rev? So you look at Washington, where Kalen DeBoer was at, and he threw it 58% of the time at Washington, number 9. Let's go all the way down to the bottom here. Where do we see Alabama at?
120.
120 with a 40%, almost 39.79. And one thing I'd like to point out about this is, hey, they threw the ball almost 40% of the time. Well, that ain't so bad. Well, one thing that tells you is last year their quarterback was Bryce Young. This year it was Jalen Milroe. Well, in the last year with Bryce Young, they threw the ball 50% of the time. They was a basically balanced team. Well, going in with Jalen Milroe, they changed their offense. They had to throw the ball a whole almost 11% less. So I mean that's a lot. Like if you look at 39 compared to 50, say they was at 50%. They go up here from being 120 to almost in the 40s.
Mm-hmm.
At 8% because Washington almost had 59.
Yeah, well, I mean that's just with Bryce Young. You had
Oh,
you
yeah,
had
yeah.
you had that, and I mean they're in the top 10. Like Washington's at
58.88.
9.
Right.
Like 120 to 9, that's 111 spaces, and there's only 130 something football teams, 133 in the FBS. So I mean that is insane. It's exponential the amount. So I mean, just to point that out, it's like, do you really think that he's going to have Jalen Milroe in there throwing the ball more than 30 times a game? And are they going to win if they do? Because my thing is, I don't think Kalen DeBoer is changing his offense. I think
Yep.
it's Jalen Milroe can adapt to the offense, or as we talked about earlier, Austin Mack can come in and he can take charge of that offense because, as Locke mentioned earlier, Kalen DeBoer has stated and saying, hey, we're bringing Austin Mack over here to Alabama to teach these guys the offense. Now, however believable that sounds to you, and
Yeah.
whatever, they want to sell you on that, that's like they ain't selling us here, because you don't just bring some kid who enrolled at Washington last year in August. So he was there at Washington from August at the beginning of the year
Mm-hmm.
all the way up until, Kalen DeBoer left when he transferred to Bama. So, I mean, not even really a year, just what, 9 months or 8 months. And that's to learn the offense, and that's Kalen DeBoer getting to watch him in practice every day. Said if you're gonna sit here and tell me that Austin Mack is not his quarterback, at least quarterback number 2 on Alabama's depth chart, then you're lying to yourself.
So just to recap with the numbers, when Kalen DeBoer is in control of the team and he's in control of what the offense is doing, he was a head coach in the D1 level for 4 years, 2 years at Fresno State and 2 years at Washington. His first year of the 2020 season, Fresno State, they threw the ball 55.74% of the time. That was the COVID year. They only played 6 games. In the 21 season, they went 10-3, had a really good year that year. They were 56.02, went up a little bit. Number 10 in the country for pass percentage attempts. Now, at Washington, he's now gone to a new place. He's got a new quarterback. He's got a better quarterback. Now, this 2022 season, when Kalen DeBoer takes over Washington with Michael Penix as his quarterback, so he's got a better quarterback than he had at Fresno State. He's on a better team. He went from the mid to high 50 mark to number 6 in 2022 at 60%. So just the last year, not this one that just completed, but the one before it, 2022 to 2023, Washington passed the ball 60.35% of the time. And then this last season that we've just completed, 2023 to 2024, they were number 9. He was at 58.88. So just a little bit under his mark that he had the year before. So in 4 years, as a head coach and in control of what his offense is doing, he has not been under 55% passing plays when he's running his offense. So now you take that stat and you look at what Alabama either had to do, chose to do, whatever you want to say. What they did with Jalen Milroe at their quarterback, 39.79. That is a whole 15% at minimum less than what he likes to do when he is in control of the team. We're not saying that Mack is the day one starter right now. He's a shoe-in. That's not what we're talking about here. We are just talking about a possibility and the interesting story developing in Alabama because of the style of play that his quarterback that he's coming into, the team that he's going to now with Alabama, they have a quarterback whose style is not to throw the ball nearly as much as he is used to when he is in control of an offense. And I want to look at his comments with Austin Mack coming in. I'll look at it in a different light. So one way you could take that is, yeah, he's saying he's bringing him over to teach the quarterbacks and to teach everybody the system that he's had in place at Washington. Two things. His system that he's bringing to Alabama. So even if all he's saying is he's bringing his guy in to teach his system, he is still implying that he has his full intention to run his offense at Alabama, not to change to Jalen's strength, because that is what we've seen this last year that Alabama had to do. They had to switch the way they wanted to run their offense to cater to Jalen's strengths. Good on them as a coaching staff. That's who your guy is. You need to cater to him so that puts your team in the best opportunity to win. They did that and they got to the semifinals. That's good coaching. As far as you're looking at the personnel you have and you're figuring out what works best with your personnel. Early on in the season, it didn't look as pretty because they weren't doing that. But Kalen DeBoer's intentions are to run his offense at Alabama. Jalen Milroe, at current standing, does not fit that mold. But if you look at those comments of bringing Mack over in a little bit of a different way, he's bringing him in to teach his offense. Well, his offense includes receivers, linemen, running backs, not just quarterbacks. So Austin Mack could be being brought in to help teach all the guys that he's going to be throwing to, that he's going to be running that offense. He wants his guy that knows how to run that offense to teach to the guys that are going to be operating in that offense with him. Either way, though, the conversation still remains that Austin Mack is a legitimate contender for the quarterback position at Alabama this coming year. I still think that Jalen Milroe is going to be the quarterback because he's a winner. He's proven. He took him to the semifinals, and he can make incredible plays. And not going with a guy like that would be seen as crazy by so many people. But there is a real story here of what Debour likes to run. And if you look at the two quarterbacks side by side, how they play the game, how they play that position, it is very clear that Austin Mack is the guy that Debour tends to want to have as his quarterback.
Well, let me throw something else in there I think is interesting because, I mean, we're talking numbers, and a lot of people, I guess, you could say is like, well, whatever, because these are, these should be on the typical stat line. So I said, I think the past is a pretty good indicator the way this might go. Let me tell you about a fella. A guy by the name of Dylan Morris, who's going to be, probably going to be quarterback at James Madison, or at least going to have a shot at it this year from what I've read. Read the stat line to you. Not the best in the world. Throws a lot of interceptions. That's his problem. But he had a 60.6% completion percentage. Threw for 2458 in yardage. That's a lot. 14 touchdowns. Like I said, 12 interceptions. So I mean, he's not going to win too many jobs. But that was good enough to be the Washington Huskies starting quarterback in 2021. You know what happened? Kalen DeBoer became a coach for 2022. Old boy brought him in a transfer quarterback. Well, now I know that Jalen Milroe is a long way from the Dylan Morris, but I'm just saying, he's done it before. He knows what offense he wants to run. I mean, that may upset you. It may piss you off. But this guy's got an identity. Now, I'm one to say he's what, that I always referred to as a throw it right, throw it left kind of guy. Now, can Milroe throw that screen game that Washington throws so much? Yeah, he can, because that's very simple. Just turn left, throw it, left, turn right, throw it right. That could boost up, and that could, you could use that to erase a lot of a lot of concerns about, well, could he feasibly throw, 35, 40 passes a game? Yeah, he can, whenever 7 or 8 of them are screens. I mean, I think that's an easy fix right there. But this has happened before, and it could happen again. And you may think that we're just trying to stir a bee's nest. If you want to believe that, then, whatever, dude. I got a PhD. I know how to read stats. I know how to read stuff. I know how to think. Whatever, take that, as you will. This is something that will become something. Also, if the past is any indicator, and I'm pulling for Milroe. I've liked the guy from the beginning. I hope he does well. But didn't the guy get benched at Alabama at the quarterback position last year because he just didn't have his crap together?
Yes, he did.
Now I'm not saying that Austin Mack's your quarterback. I'm just saying I would probably be drinking a lot of my Mylanta if I were the number one with that guy in the room. 6'6", 226, going to be the guy's starter at a different place. I mean, I'm just saying this is a story, and you might not want it to be a story. And I'd say that Alabama folks, they probably didn't want Nick Saban to leave either, but that was a story, and that happened. And my thing is here, like I said at the beginning, if you believe this Austin Mack character is coming down there to help him understand the lingo of the Kalen DeBoer system, I'm sure he will. But I don't think it ends there. I mean, I think that right now, and even if and hopefully Milroe goes on a tear, and this motivates him because he's the kind of guy I think that likes to play with a chip on his shoulder.
For sure.
I think it'll help him out. I think he can find his way, and like what Rev said, he's a winner, and and that matters. I mean, that really does matter. But boy, I'm telling you what, they're putting him in a pressurized situation, and I think that if I'm a head coach and I got a quarterback, because I can tell you, I've done it both ways. It's a whole lot easier to win when you have a quarterback who can do certain things that you want him to do. And when you don't, then all of a sudden what happens is every single week you are trying to find something. You're trying to find an identity because the quarterback is so central to everything that if they can't deliver and your team is not set up to put it in high school terms, it'd be pretty cool, if you could go from being, a 10 personnel air raid spread to all of a sudden being a foot to foot double wing triple option offense. But you know what? You can't. Teams that do that, they usually lose every game they play and end up firing a coach pretty quick. Well, the difference, at the college level, everybody knows everything you're going to do. They know everything about you. They've seen everything you've got. And every week is such a challenge. And I think if you're not confident in that spot as a head coach, especially whenever you go into a pressure cooker like Alabama, you're going to be thinking things. And I'm sure that he's going to give Milroe his shot. But boy, I'm telling you, he's got his guy in the room, and he's done it before. Michael Penix did the exact same thing. I don't know. I'm just saying that I kind of laughed some of the comments because it's like, dude, come on, man, roll tide, whatever. Yeah, I hope they do. I like them. I ain't got a problem with Alabama, but I do have a problem with people who deny reality. And right now, if I were Jalen Milroe, I would be pumping it as hard as I can to be everything that I am, because that dude in that room with you, problem we hadn't even talked about, Austin Mack has 4 years of eligibility left. Jalen Milroe has 2 years. He's got this coming year and the next year. And Jalen Milroe ain't the kind. I don't think he's going to jump to the draft next year. I don't think he's that guy. And that, you may not like that, but I don't think he's that quarterback. I think he'll play 2 more years at Alabama, and I think then he's going to try pros, and I think he's got a shot. He's an athlete. He's a hard worker. He's motivated. I'm just saying, Kalen DeBoer didn't bring that old boy down here to the South for no reason. He's done it before. I don't know.
And
I guess I'm trying to be nice about it, I guess, but I'm just saying that I guess I've had enough sucky things happen to me in my life that I'm pretty good at hound dogging out a setup. This doesn't feel good, and I'm pulling for Milroe because I want to see him prove him wrong. But if he don't prove him wrong, I can promise you I know probably who's going to be in that spot to try to prove him wrong.
And see, my thing is, we talked about Alabama losing all their wide receivers when Saban left. Well, them guys that decommitted that were coming into the class, like Ryan Williams, and I think there was one other 5-star. they've actually changed their minds again, and they're coming to Alabama. And why do you think that is? Well, Kalen DeBoer set them down, and he said, "Hey, listen, it's like we're going to throw the ball 20% more than we threw it last year. What do you think about that? Like, you think about your targets, and now these guys have left, so you're coming in here and you're going to have to be catching the ball, and you're not going to be catching the ball, ever so slightly. You're going to get 5, 6, maybe even 8 to 10 receptions a game, along with 3 or 4 other dudes every single game. It's like, that's something. It's like, if I was a wide receiver, and somebody told me that, I'd probably come back to school there. And I think that's kind of what Kalen DeBoer did in order to get these wide receivers back. And, I think that they're probably going to end up throwing the ball. Now, can Jalen Milroe do that? He can throw the ball. He can throw the ball far. He can throw the ball well enough for a receiver to catch it in most scenarios. The thing is, Kalen DeBoer's offensive. I mean, you can go back. We've covered Michael Penix and the Washington Huskies throughout the semis and the playoffs, and even like their conference championship game. You go through and you watch our film. Michael Penix has to go through his progressions to where he's going 3, 4, 5 guys almost every play unless it's a screen, and that's one thing that you don't really see Jalen Milroe do. So, I mean, if you're going to sit here and you're going to tell me, hey, in the next, out of the 4 or 5 months that he will have with Kalen DeBoer is going to teach that man to read a defense and go through his
I agree with
progression.
that.
It's like, if you tell me that, I'm going to be like, okay, we'll see. And I think you'll find out in spring if he has. Because I don't think you can learn to read a field and go through your progression, especially after you haven't been able to do it with Nick Saban, who I know I consider the greatest coach of all time, and I know anybody from Alabama will. I mean, you're telling me he couldn't teach this guy to go through his progression, and he couldn't teach him to read more than 2 routes? I mean, come on now. You're telling me Kalen DeBoer is going to come in and do that? I don't think so. I think that Kalen DeBoer has had months with his guy, Austin Mack, and he has months more left with him. So, I mean, this dude is already 6, 7 months up on Milroe, and, that's not a good sign for Milroe. I mean, would I like to see Milroe start next year? Yeah, I would, because I think it would help Georgia beat Alabama. But that's just me. So, I mean, take it how you want it. I think that the right way to go about it is to probably let Jalen Milroe play himself out of the position, because I think he will.
So
Something else I want to mention before we kind of close out. Now, I'd said this before that that not say before, I mean when we were first kind of chatting this one over. One of the things that really stands out to me with Milroe's stats that we haven't looked at, and you got to go into the splits, and find the categorized stuff, which is easy enough on ESPN. But one of the things that really stood out to me was what they do on the goal line. And I know that goal to goal situations are very often those are run heavy spots. You especially get down there inside the 5. I get that. But on passing, I just wanted to see is there a discrepancy? So we look there, and this is the 23 stats. The 23, well, I guess 23. Alabama didn't play in 24. Or no, they did this year. They did play on New Year's Day. I'm wrong about that. 6 attempted passes, and one of those attempted passes, if you look on down there at the by goal to goal, the next category down, chance right there. One of them was a 4th and goal that went for I'm gonna make everybody drunk, for 31 yards. So I mean there had to be some serious snaggage right there. I mean that's something else.
that was the Auburn one.
Yeah, that was the Auburn.
It was. And if you also look, 6 attempts, 2 sacks. on 3rd and goal, 1 out of 3. 33% conversion rate right there. That's not the best in the world, and I know that we may not have easy. Well, we do. Somebody go up there and look at Michael Penix's stats and tell me if this is not a different philosophy. And now I know people can change, and I know whenever you got a guy like Jalen Milroe, who is essentially just a third ball carrier in the backfield when it comes to running the ball. I mean, he's a great back. Look at those goal to goal scenarios there for Penix. 26 throws, goal to go. That's a different philosophy.
Yep.
That's not just a different player. That's a different philosophy.
And I mean, 12 of them were touchdowns.
Now he did throw a pick, to be fair, he did turn one over down there, but like I say, I mean, all I can say is that when you see those numbers right there, 26 goal to go passes, that's a different philosophy from what was put in play at Alabama. Now, I think on that, just like what I would say, if I were making the argument for Milroe, you got a guy like him on the goal line, you're going to run it a lot. I guarantee you. I mean, I haven't looked at Penix's, run stats on the goal line, but I bet you money he didn't run it nearly as much as Jalen Milroe did, because that's the kind of player Milroe is. So that has to be considered. But if you got a coach who is throwing the ball over 55% of the plays that he has per game, and he's throwing the ball 26 times in goal-to-goal situations, that man wants to throw the football. And and he could, and he might could give, some lip service. Now, here's what I think would change things. I think that coming off this year, just seeing that, general stat line that Milroe has, I think if Milroe were a senior, I think he starts. And I think you ride him all the way through, no matter what. You try to shape things for him. You try to cater him or cater to him, because he's going to be your guy. He's going to be the leader of that team. But I really think, and I mean, and some may say that I'm wrong, and that's okay, because I mean that's part of what all this is. It's about having a conversation. I think that second year of eligibility means something, because just like what you said with those wide receivers opting back in, whenever he turns and he tells you, is like, hey, look at McMillan. McMillan missed a bunch of games this year. He still got 45 catches, still had, over 500 yards, and basically half a season, maybe a little bit better than half a season, hurt all year. Came back and, I mean, played prominently. That was one who I'd mentioned, in that Texas semifinal game. I said, McMillan's going to be, he's going to impact that game.
Had over 100 yards.
Sure enough, he did. Absolute great, screen guy. Probably going to make a living. He's going to be in that Welker Edelman category. Guy's going to make a living doing it in the NFL. When you can point to people like that, or what was the big play guy? Rome, what was it?
Odunze, yeah.
92 catches all over the field. And you can set them down, because heck, I've done the same thing. I mean, it's like, I know I've never coached it, at the college level, but I can, if I've got a guy who's pretty decent, an inside receiver who's either got the frame or who's got the intelligence, I can say, hey, I can hit you on Y cross whenever I can, like one time I always think about it's a funny thing. Our headsets got crossed up, and every single time that we entered into a third down situation, and this is against state championship football team, and we certainly were not a state championship football team. Every single time, what were they screaming on third down? What? Y cross, and we completed it every time we threw it. And when you can point to that and say, hey, I can give you a chance. Whenever he points to him and says, hey, you can be Odunze, hey, you can be McMillan, we're going to target you, dude. And you know why that you can rest assured we're going to target you? Because I targeted those dudes. We're going to throw the ball. And he's going to tell him, they see 60% of the time. 60%, man, it's going to be coming to you. Now, are they going to hit 60%? Probably not. But is that a good line to sell? You better believe it is. Because, I'm one of those. I mean, I know how you get wide receivers. You tell them you can give them the ball because that's what they want. And And I'm pretty sure they probably slipped that line like Chance said, like, and they said, well, we know how that went. I mean, I know, but I'm here, you know, got this quarterback. And I mean, it's like we say, I mean, and I know, I'm kind of being like a little tongue in cheek with it, but tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong. Go ahead and tell me. Talk to me November. See what it looks like. The thing that I wonder about with this is, Rev said something that I think was the most accurate thing that anybody on any platform anywhere, because half of them got it wrong. I mean, it's one of those things. The Texas Michigan game, I think it's a similar thing that, or no, excuse me, Washington, Michigan. Can Washington win? We were all firm in saying, yeah, yeah, they can win. They're not going to win, though. Well, why were they not going to win? This was Rev's famous line. They have to do more things to win than Michigan does. And if you want my, rip off of Rev, I think that Austin Mack actually has to do less to get this position by the end of the season than Jalen Milroe does to keep it. Now, like I say, I like Milroe. So people can say whatever they want to. I like him. And I hope he wins out because I think he's a good story, whatever. But I'm telling you, he's got a tough road ahead of him. And I think he knows it. I'm sure, he wouldn't say that, but because they're always, oh man, we're best buddies. We go at 1 a.m. and eat tacos. Bull. He knows what Austin Mack is. It's gonna be a fun year.
Rev, what did you have to say to close out here?
So to put away the argument that, oh, the off season they'll teach Jalen Milroe how to read a whole defense and make 3-4 reads going into next season. It took Patrick Mahomes 2 years to be able to read a defense in the NFL with Andy Reid, who is widely considered one of the best, if not the best, offensive play caller in the NFL, and has been that for quite a while. And many consider Patrick Mahomes to be the greatest quarterback to ever touch the game. I'm not getting into that argument. I don't want to have it. But many people consider him to be very, very good. And he is very, very good. It took that guy 2 years to be able to read defenses in the NFL. If it took him 2 years, are we really going to assume, and that's Patrick, are we going to go ahead and make the argument that it's only going to take Jalen 6 months? Really? I don't know. I don't know about that. Maybe he can. And I also say this: we've discussed the ability of elite quarterbacks and what sets elite quarterbacks from great quarterbacks. What sets them apart? Processing, how they read the field, how quick everything is to them. Because to them, like in their eyes, everything slows down. They're able to process everything at a much faster rate than almost any human who would ever touch a football on the football field. And there are very few guys that you would consider to be elite and have the ability to process that quickly, to make those reads, to make those good throws, to have it all combined to be able to be considered the highest level at that position. I don't think that Jalen Milroe has the capacity to be elite at that. And there are some things, like there are things you can learn, and you can definitely teach a guy how to get better at them. Like there is a level that you can teach. If you know how to teach it, which Debour does, I would highly assume. He knows how to teach it, and there are definitely things that you can teach to make a guy get better. But there is a capping point where your brain can't process it any faster. And I think that ceiling for Jalen is lower than it is for other guys. And it might be lower than it is for Mack, because that's when you watch them play and you watch how that process goes in their head, you can see whether they can cut it or not. Now, obviously, we've only seen Mack in high school film at a different speed. Fair enough. I'll give you that. But there is only a certain level that you can get to when it comes to teaching that ability, because your brain has to process all that information at a rapid rate. And then you have to respond with your physical ability to make it happen. And I think that you're putting way too much on a coaching staff, or you're putting maybe way too much on a really good, great player. Not even good. Jalen Milroe is a great football player. You're putting a lot of pressure on two groups of people there, a player and a coach, that just isn't fair. It just might not be fair to them to assume that in 6 months' time, 8 months' time, they can turn him into a pocket passer that can make 3-4 reads every time he drops back. That's a lot to ask of a guy who's never done that before in his career. So I just wanted to add that to it, just because I think that that's a little bit of a false narrative to me, that any old guy can just pick up how to read a defense. That's not true. That's why you don't see it happen very often. And the whole point of this video and the one that we made before, and Locke rip something that I said off, I'll rip something that he says off. There's a there. There's a reason why we talk about this. There is a there about this story. And it might all end up hunky-dory, and Jalen Milroe might ride off into the sunset as a champion. And I hope he does. Same thing with Locke. Yeah. I like Jalen Milroe. I like his story. I like the fact that he's trying to prove people wrong. And I actually like Alabama. I mean, they've been one of my, not my favorite team, but they've been on my list for a while because of my family and my great-granddad, who was a diehard Bama fan. So I hope they do well. And I hope Debour does well. I like him as a coach, and I want him to succeed at Alabama because those are big shoes to fill. And I don't wish that on anybody. I hope he does great. But that being said, there's still a conversation that I think is being had behind closed doors at the University of Alabama. And I think that we can start having that too. And I don't think it's wrong. I don't think we're clout chasing. I don't think we're creating false narratives by talking about this. This is a there. It's already there. And we're just bringing it to light a little bit more.
I want to say something before we go off too, just on something you said, like, talking about the say Milroe's ceiling, is limited on, in terms of being like, a 3-4 read quarterback. That's not to say anything about, and I know how some people will, construe things, and, if you do, I mean, it says something about you. That's not a knock on a person's intelligence at all. Because the way that, you worded that in one section is, you talked about, whenever that, like the process you go through, like you process it, to the way that you process it, and then your physical attributes take over. Well, and I think that that's really a good way to kind of, I think, just kind of, just put just a period on it and say, here's why we think this is so interesting. It isn't that DeBoer's playing politics. It isn't that he's trying to create, havoc, in the quarterback room or anything of that nature. I think what you see is that there are two different styles of processing when it comes to playing quarterback. You have the guys who can draw. Like we've looked at several. We looked at Julian Sayin, who transferred out of Alabama to Ohio State. We've looked the other day. Chance and I looked at George McIntyre, who is top notch. I mean, if you haven't seen that film, man, you need to watch that kid's high school film, because that's not even right. He's an interesting one to watch. But my thing with Milroe is his process leads him in the end not to a check down, but to a Heisman caliber run, because that's who he is. Like his strength, when all else fails, I'm going to run it. It's not that I'm going to dump it off to a fullback in the flat. It's not that I'm going to look for, for this, this emergency route after everything else is considered. What makes him him is that he can look. Yeah, I mean, you look at it and you can say, oh, well, he just looks at one side of the field. If you could run a football like that, you wouldn't look at the other side of the field either.
Right.
And I mean, and that's just, God in heaven talent is what that is. I mean, he is such a ball carrier, and he does crazy things when it happens. That's like those little floaters he'll throw. I mean, as a Chance can tell you, I mean, that floater hurt. I mean, that's what busted Georgia in that SEC championship game. Just that little toss he made whenever he was on the run. And everybody can do that. In fact, I mean, that's probably like a 99th percentile thing that you're going to see. So it's not to say anything about his intelligence or anything about, like mental ability or anything like that. It's just saying that you have got a head coach who has a track record of wanting a particular kind of processor at quarterback, and your current quarterback is the opposite of that style of processor. And, and it's one of those, you got a zig at head coach and a zag at quarterback, and that matters.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think one statement that I'll say that, I think I've stuck with is, I used to say when Bryce Young was the quarterback at Alabama, Bryce Young will never win the national championship with Alabama. He's great. He can make it there. He can go to the playoffs. He can even beat Georgia if he wants to, but the thing about it is he ain't going to win it all. And I think if you're Alabama, your standard is to win it all. You've won it all so much that that's the standard now. Like if that doesn't happen, then I think the world is ending at Alabama usually. And they're not good enough to settle with the SEC championship. They're not going to settle with making it to the semis. To next year will be a 12-team playoff. They're not going to settle with making it, winning the first round. It's natty or bust. However you may take it, that's what it is at Alabama. And the thing is, Jalen Milroe can't take them to the promised land, in my opinion. He's a great quarterback, but there is limitations. So my thing is, you go with the ceiling. Austin Mack, he might be unproven, might not have any film on him from Washington, even though he was there for 7 months. And you might not get to see him till spring. But the thing is, he's been with Kalen DeBoer for 7 months. He'll have the same amount of time Milroe has to learn the offense. He'll have that same amount of time to sit there and get even better in that same offense. And you know what? My thing is, if you want to win, you got that ceiling with Austin Mack. Maybe it is terrible and they lose 3 games with them, but the ceiling is so much higher. You're going natty or bust, you got to go with Austin Mack. And I think that at Alabama, where they raise champions and winners, you go with who's going to win you more. And you can even start with Milroe the first few weeks, but you got Georgia as your first SEC game. That's a tough one to go into, even if it's at home. So I think that, with the schedule for Alabama next year as it is, it's a lot of tough competition. And what we saw from Jalen Milroe against the most elite competition, that dude has his one read and he'll get sacked. And that's probably, he gets sacked 15% of every pass play he has this past year. So that number's going up to, I think, 25% every time he passes against an elite team. So my thing is, you play 3 or 4 elite teams in the regular season this year, you're going to get sacked a lot with Jalen Milroe. I just don't like them odds. I say you go with Austin Mack, and you try to at least have the boom potential to win it all. And that's just the way I look at it. Take it how you want it. Now, with that being said, we do appreciate everything that y'all have done for us. We appreciate all the likes, comments. We love the discussion, so keep doing that. Appreciate all y'all for tuning in. But for the Austin Mack talk, I hope we get to talk about it even more in Alabama football as it continues for us here. Stay locked in, everyone.